Hi, I'm Barb.
And I'm Alex.
And we're Enchanterium. In this video, we'll be making this year's winter/Christmas doll, the magical Arctic fox. This video is a collaboration with the wonderful Polish embroidery artist Magdalena from birb.studio. I know it's been a while since our last video, so let's get started. Let's start with the first unboxing of this video, where we open our lovely Interstellar blue Prowess smart doll. We had purchased her back in July, and she's been patiently waiting till December to be customized for the holiday season. She has one of the cutest faces out of the smart doll face-ups in my opinion, and her ginger hair works really well with her skin color. It's a shame we will change it all in a minute, but what needs to be done, needs to be done. I'm going to start by making shoes for this doll, which is a bit unusual, but the shoes were the only thing in this design that have been planned from the very beginning. I'm making lasts for the doll by making a silicone mold of her feet first. I then cast the feet in resin and added a tip with epoxy clay to make the shoe shape I liked. With some stiff cardboard, I'm tracing the shape of the bottom of the last, this will be the insole, and cutting two mirrored pieces. I covered these with glue and a piece of cotton, this will be touching the foot of the doll later. I trimmed the cotton with pinking shears and glued the little tabs down. For the next step, I secure the insoles to the lasts with some tape. The feet won't reach the tip of the shoe to fill it out, so to make sure the tip doesn't collapse, I'm making a kind of paper mache but with fabric. I use some watered down glue to create this reinforcement and attach it to the bottom of the sole. After it has dried, we can remove it from the last. This took a bit of force, but the result is pretty good and stiff, which is the most important. To make the upper of the shoe, I'm using a stretchy suede-like fabric. I made the patterns for the upper by taping the last and tracing the tape cast. I'm cutting 4 pieces, 2 for the inside, 2 for the outside, making sure they are mirrored. My pattern doesn't include seam allowance, so I'm adding that while cutting it out. I match one outside and one inside piece, and I'm using the drawn out pattern as a guide to baste them together. This gives a better result than making this pattern with seam allowance and trying to match it up. When the seam is basted, I can go over it with the machine. I repeated that for the seam in the back as well as for the other shoe. I'm tracing the pattern line for the bottom edge with a permanent pen so it doesn't go away when I press open the seam allowances we had just sewn. The basting stitches get removed, the seam allowance trimmed and pressed open. I'm using the lasts to press it open as it has the proper curve of the shoe. After turning the upper to the right side, I put it on the last and glue it to the shell we made earlier, making sure I pull the fabric so that the bottom edge mark matches with the edge of the insole. I fold down the edges onto the bottom of the insole with a generous amount of glue as well. I use some thread to make sure it lies tight in the tip of the shoe and smother it in some more glue to make sure it will not come apart later. When the glue is dry, I use a very sharp razor to thin down all of the bulk I just created. This will ensure the shoe lies flat in the sole. We will continue this segment in a moment, but we have to open another package first. This time from our friends at Elegoo. They sent us the wash and cure machine from the Mercury series to test out and use for this project. This felt like Christmas to me, although it was more towards St. Nicholas Day when we received it. It's a popular holiday to celebrate in Poland when kids get gifts, so it kinda checks out. The machine comes with a bunch of accessories to make the process of cleaning up resin prints easier, faster, and less messy. DJ Barbie in the house, put your hands up! Okay, let's take this beauty to her proper destination and test it out. I have printed the soles for the shoes, which Alex has kindly spent hours crying while modeling, and I'm going to use the printer bed attachment to put it in the Mercury. I didn't have quite enough alcohol to wash it, so I filled it some more. The cover needs to be in place for the machine to work, and I'm setting it to the wash cycle. I think you can tell how amazed I am.
And while Mercury is working, we're going to make some fries.
Since I knew I would be getting the machine, I didn't clean up these prints, which are Aquino's lanterns that I want to sprinkle around the house. So I'm putting them into the basket, which is another way you can use the machine if the prints are too big to use with a bed or you just batched out the prints like I did.
niektóre wystają.
Sometimes when I print stuff without the support, it gets really suctioned to the bed, which is a good thing, but I do this to take it off. After the washing is done, the machine can switch modes to the cure setting. All you need to do is put in the acrylic disc and your models, set the timer, and it cures the prints. So much easier than stuffing them into my nail lamp and clicking the button every minute, and it looks so much cooler. Thank you Elegoo for sending the machine over. It will definitely speed up our printing game and we love it already. Now back to the shoes. You might be confused why the soles aren't transparent, more on that later, but they have been painted a bit and I will attach them to the uppers, with the last still on the inside. I'm using hot glue for this. It's probably gonna fail, but it seemed like the best option. I'm making sure the insole is in the sole by pushing it down with a crochet hook. To take the lasts out and put the feet in, I'm taking apart the back seam, leaving about 1 centimeter from the sole sewn. I did a small hand stitch there to make sure it doesn't open up all the way. I hemmed the back edges and decided on a final length of the boots and hemmed that as well, trimming the excess where needed. The shoes were then painted by Alex, since the grey didn't match with the other colors we later chose to make the rest of the clothes with. This video is not edited chronologically, but logically it made more sense to show you the whole shoe process at once. Here you can see I put the feet in the shoes, and you might be wondering why they aren't blue, and the simple answer is that I don't have high-heeled feet in blue. But I made the shoes tall enough to not show the feet specifically for this purpose. Alex and I collaborated on decorating the shoes with ribbons, glitter vinyl, and other bits and bobs.
Let's move on from the very bottom to the top and make her face. We have 3 options to choose from: Genesis, Entropy, and Kanata sculpts. These 2 first are semi-real and the last one is a classic anime style. We're going to work with Kanata because all of our custom smart dolls have a fantasy anime aesthetic and we want her to fit in the group. I have to admit, working with the sculpt was not the easiest. I'm more used to painting around bigger eyes like on Mirai sculpt. You know, all our previous custom smart dolls except for Dawn are Mirai's. But I'm always up for a challenge. I started painting her lashes with dark hair in mind, but then we changed the idea for the hair color, so I wanted to paint over it with white paint, but I absolutely hate the result. So let's start over with white hair in mind. The head was sprayed with Mr. Super Clear matte sealant 2 times before the first layer of watercolor pencils. And after a light sketch and another layer of spray, I can move on to acrylic paints. I want her face to look calm, serene, and very friendly, and I'm trying to embrace the narrow eye shape. White lashes are not what we usually see on people's faces, and I know that they won't be very visible from far, so I decided to contour them with a dark blue pencil, just to make sure they pop more. We like our custom smart dolls with a bit of fantasy twist, and this one will be an Arctic fox with a starry and snowy theme, so I'm painting a few little sparkles on her cheek and forehead. I have to admit that I might get carried away with the sparkles, but I think with a sprinkle of micro glitter, she looks super pretty.
For the final outfit, because there were 2 other dresses before this one, I'm using a pattern by Requiem Art Designs. The workflow is pretty usual. First, darts and shoulder seams to connect the back and front. Then hemming the armholes, since I didn't want to put in any sleeves. I thought I would fold over and stitch, and I did, but then I ripped it out because it was ugly, and remembered you can use bias tape for this. So I did, but then also ripped that out as well, because I didn't account for the number of folds in the tape. So for the 3rd time, the supposed charm, I trimmed one of the parts of the bias tape and I'm attaching it down from the right side, then folding it twice to the wrong side and stitching it down. It gives a very neat finish, which I am quite pleased with. I attached the collar next, put the side seams together and made sure to press the seam allowances towards the back. I hemmed the openings in the front, as well as the bottom of the skirt, and put it together in the back for a result like this. It needs an underskirt, so let's do that next. I cut a metric crop ton of fabric strips and I pressed them in half. Then I measured out the lengths I needed and pieced together the strips that were too short. Yes, that pin went into my mouth. What you can do about it? I was very proud of myself for using Roman numerals made with pins to mark which strip is what, and started from the longest one. I sewed a long basting stitch along the raw edge and began gathering. Making this one ruffle took me 20 minutes. Not great. I sewed it to the edge of the skirt and looked for a better solution. Instead of sewing a long straight stitch, I pull out some of the thread and sew a zigzag stitch on the side of this thread. This is much looser to pull and only takes a few seconds to gather. I top stitch the rest of the gathers and finish the skirt with a waistband and a snap.
I'm always a bit skeptical about painting clothes, but I really wanted to try to make a gradient on this dress. The theme and the colors are just perfect excuse to play with an airbrush. I'm working in layers starting from very pale blue. Do you know the show Ruby? My favorite character is Weiss, and she always has some kind of a white to blue fade in her outfit. And I wanted to make this dress kind of in her aesthetic. But the plain fade is not enough for a magical girl style, so I'm sketching some diamond shapes on the front panel. I'm a henna artist, as you can see sometimes on my hands, and I live for decorating stuff. So this was my favorite part of this whole doll. I couldn't stop myself from adding henna-like ornaments to the design, and after a while of painting, I have this. A lot of dots and stars to marry the design with the sparkles on her face. I feel like the eyes are the weakest point this time. I designed them blue, but for some reason our printer made them pink, and that changed my plans for the accessories later. But you know, happy accidents and all. I covered the print with a glossy varnish and glued the glass cabochon on top. For her hair, I'm going to use Siberia nylon from the Doll Hair Emporium. I prepared the wefts using white glue and a ruler. To make a wig cap, I'm securing the head with a plastic bag and covering the head with a piece of cloth. After a few layers of craft glue, I'm trimming all the unnecessary parts. I'm placing the weft one by one, starting from the bottom, at the back, and going around as I want to try to make her bangs. To do the parting wefts, I'm going to use my hair straightener technique. I'm wrapping the hair around a thin cardboard and pressing it with heat. Last time I made a fringe on a smart doll, it turned out to be a bit too short, so this time I'm taking it extra slow. I cut the front strands shorter and curl it slightly in anime style. I thought for a serene character, the bold waves would be a good choice, and I'm sure it would be if there was a bit more volume in her hair. I have to admit I didn't have enough fiber to make it right, and the head cap is still visible in some places. We both decided that the ends will become donors and go to the top to make the hairstyle look more full. Every time we make some kind of a cute character, Barb suggests a bob hairstyle. And I never agree on it. I don't know why, but it just never suits what I have in mind for our dolls. So this time I said okay, we're doing it, but just because I need that fiber. And it turned out to look really cute actually. Barb says it reminds her of Winter from aespa and their Savage music video. At least the name is fitting, I guess. I added more to the bangs and to the sides, so there's no blank spots anymore.
Welcome to my floor! This is also not the first, but the final cloak that I will be making for this doll. Since the doll is big and the cloak is big, I needed to cut it on the ground as my desk is not that big. I traced it out with chalk and cut it with my rotary blade. I couldn't find a thread that would match the fabric color, so let's go on a quick trip to my favorite haberdashery. It was a particularly rainy day, so I decided to take my car. I made sure to take a scrap of the fabric with me to test out how the colors fit together. They all look alright through the lens of my phone, but in real life the difference was much bigger. I was able to narrow it down to this one, and I admired all of the ribbons and notions while I was waiting to be checked out. Mission complete! Now that we have the thread, let's wind the bobbin and get sewing. I'm using a foot that has this guide thingy to make it easier for me to zigzag all of the edges of the fabric. This particular fabric frays a lot, so it's a good idea to make the edges secure, since I'm not the only person who'll be working on it. After the edges are zigzagged, I hemmed the cape all along the curve and in the front. The pattern for the cape is also from Requiem Art Designs. For stiffer fabrics, I like to follow up the iron with this marbly block. It cools down the edge faster and makes it lay flatter. I assembled the hood according to the instructions and added it to the cape at the neck. To finish that edge off, I used some bias tape that will double as a closure. It looks very mystical, and it's ready to be sent off to Magdalena from birb.studio, who will hand embroider it with gorgeous beaded snowflake designs. In the beginning, we thought this doll would be a magical girl with musical powers, but that idea didn't pan out as I had some issues printing this large of a violin with translucent resin. I'm not sure whether it was my fault or the resin, but we had to scrap the idea. I designed a snowy scepter instead. I went through a couple of versions. A ball with a halo that looked like one of the cheap Mary figurines our grandma had in the noughties, a sad crystal, and a D20. I ended up going with a bigger crystal and painted it with translucent resin at last, which was provided for this project by Elegoo in addition to the wash and cure machine. I sanded it down with a coarse grit sandpaper so it diffuses the light, which will be on the inside. I have these from Akino's project, and I like the compactness of the circuit, but I also don't like how yellow the LED is. I have some cooler white LEDs in my stash, so I decided to resolder it to the circuit. I'm taking pics to make sure I don't mess up the polarity of the LED and heat up the solder to release the spring and the LED. With the new one, I do the reverse of operations, and it worked like a charm.
After a proper treatment in the Elegoo Mercury machine, I sprayed the prints with a primer and let it dry for 24 hours. I did the basic colors of camera because we all know how to apply paint with a brush. I wanted to bring out the crystal-like vibe from this shape, and I'm painting each side with a darker shade, creating an illusion of depth and then highlighting the edges. The light can be switched on and off by twisting the cap, so we can fix the crystal in place permanently. I'm using 2-part polymer glue and then adding a snake from epoxy clay to make sure the connection is extra strong. The reason we want to make her an Arctic Fox magical girl is because we already have the ears and the tail done. I prepared them almost a year ago for a fantasy wedding collab with the doll fairy, but we changed the idea for a succubus and the props were left unused. I don't like the ears anymore, so let's make another pair. This time I'm using Craftform as a base, so the shapes are symmetrical, at least in theory. I placed the strongest magnets I had inside the head, so I can use small ones on the outside. I tried making the ears with the foam clay, but it didn't really want to stick to the foam, so I switched to using epoxy clay. This stuff never disappoints me. After curing and sanding, I'm painting them white with a bit of pink inside. I thought a pink fluff would be a good idea, but she didn't look like a fox, so I changed that for white yarn. As I said, the tail was made a long time ago and my technique improved a little bit from then, but the basics are the same. You need a wire and some kind of a filler. I chose to use medical tape and leftovers from brushing the yarn, and believe me, I have a lot of those. I think I did 3 layers of medical tape and fluff before the volume was alright. And now I can cover this weird white worm with brushed but not straightened yarn wefts. I have prepared white yarn with pink nylon, and white yarn stained with pink alcohol ink. And after a lot of work, I have this. It's so fluffy and beautiful. It's going to be attached to the doll with a magnet that I also covered with wefts. The doll needs a few more details, so I'm gluing a lot of ribbons, pearls, gems, and tiny little iridescent stars to make it look magical.
This is how she turned out. She turned out really cute. This project took a very long time, but it was worth it in the end. Like, always, I guess. We decided to name her Sylvie, as with the addition of the pink elements, she reminds me of a particular Pokemon in their shiny form. Thanks to Elegoo for sending us over the machine and resin for this project, and a huge thanks to Magdalena from birb.studio for collaborating with us on this project. You can find her art on Instagram, which we have linked below. A thanks to all of you, our viewers, as we hit a milestone of 100,000 this year. We haven't gotten the play button yet, but the most important thing is your support. We hope to see you all through the next year.
Happy holidays to everyone, regardless of what you're celebrating this season. We wish you good times with your family and friends, and may the next year bring you all the best. We'll see you on the 8th of January for a special celebration.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram for some sneak peeks and subscribe for future videos. Have an enchanted day, happy holidays, and we'll see you next time. Bye! Halo? Nie. Nie. Okej.